Hello and welcome to Big Bang Radio Spotlights. This is a show where we talk to independent artists from around the world about their music and the process for making it. I'm your host, Angie Bennett, and today I got to talk with Drew Davidsen. Without any further ado, here's the interview. Why don't we start off? Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're staying, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so currently I'm in the Nashville, Tennessee area. Right now I'm in Murfreesboro. But I grew up in the 70s. My father was an astrophysics professor who actually built a telescope that flew on the space shuttle.
Cool.
And he had two loves, astrophysics and music. And when I was 7 years old, I saw Ella Fitzgerald down at Pier 6, which was incredible. And before that, when I was 2, my parents will tell you this story. We were at Wolf Trap seeing Beverly Sills, and I was trying to compete with her with my arias. And they realized people didn't pay to see Drew. So we got to kind of go in the parking lot and quiet him down a minute and then go back in. But ever since then, I've been playing music. I then went to the cello, and then, fast forward to high school, I turned it sideways, and my father bought me a bass. And I took the cello home in the 3rd grade because girls were playing the violin, and the double bass was too big to go on the bus. So my dad had a guitar, and the cello kind of looked like a guitar, so I took cello home. And then in the Navy, in the early 90s, I fell in love with the guitar. And I've been chasing tone ever since. Notes, songs. Listen to everybody from the Beatles to Ray Charles to Alan Parsons to, anything. George Benson, all of it,
You said your dad played guitar. Did anybody else in your family? Do you come from a musical family or?
Yeah, a little bit. My mother did sing in choirs and such, but my dad was really my main guy. When we were little, we would sit on the couch together and he would pull out the bongos or the conga. Actually, we'd pull out a conga, and we'd sit it between us. And me being a very auditory person, he'd play a rhythm, and then I would copy it. And they just knew I liked music. So, as soon as I could, I was in the Peabody Conservatory as a young person, studying like early childhood music, whatever they would call that, and then on to the cello. So mostly my dad. His band, he was in this interesting band. And some people know the name of this band, although I don't know if he had the same name as the famous group. But they played up and down the East Coast and were called the Chessmen. And they made some records. And I have some of his old 45s from his days at Princeton when, before then when he had this band together. And they were paying their way to go to college, playing nightclubs and little school dances. And so I just kind of grew up around music in the house. We always had a grand piano. And we just, my father always liked great songs. So I gravitated toward that.
So there wasn't really an age when you thought, I'm going to do this and carry on and make music my life. There wasn't really a moment like that? It just kind of evolved?
Well, that kind of happened when I was about 20, when I was in the Navy. I knew I was going to get out, and I had a real spiritual experience. We were in Haifa, Israel for 10 days, and I actually got baptized in the Jordan River in Israel by the naval chaplain.
Wow.
And I had this real spiritual experience, like, I really want to do this. I didn't really even know what this is. At the time, I was listening to a lot of jazz groups, and you'll hear that influence in a lot of my older records. And I was listening to Acoustic Alchemy, Larry Carlton, all of those session players. And so I would say then that's probably 1990, 1991, I knew. But then I really knew. That did a lot of odd jobs. Then about 2009, I really knew. And that's when I released Around Again, my first album that scored a Billboard single. And they were playing it 50 times a week on the Wave in LA, and I was starting to, experience that, which was fun. I didn't really know what all that was. But so, I have different times, I guess, where I see it again.
So how did you get your start in music then?
So what happened was, my professional start, what happened was the internet was so great. I was hanging around in Nashville a lot with a man named Keith Moore, who runs a website called Indie Heaven. A lot of independent artists on there, and it doesn't exist anymore. But I was learning a lot from him about what it would take to be an artist. And then I remember discovering a woman on a website called the Jazz Network, and her name was Kim Giles. And she was really talking harsh to these artists who were complaining, like, no, you got to get this done. Nothing's going to come easy. And I wrote her and said, I really like you. You sound like the female version of my friend Keith. You got answers to the test. At this time, it was like 2008, I was like, I knew I had talent, but I was missing like the blueprint. So I reached her and she agreed to consult me, and it was just well worth it. I asked my friends, what do you think? about this. It's like a few $100. They went, oh, that sounds perfect. The $20 would be concerned. If it was $1,000 would be concerned. And she introduced me to a woman named Deborah Lewow, who was a radio promoter at Capitol Records for many years, and then later on went to Peak and died of ALS. And she made like Pat Metheny's career, like Carlton's career, all these guitar players. So she took me on and sent me to radio, and I hit the ground running ever since then.
That's excellent. Now, I know you write your own music. Maybe you could share your creative process with our listeners.
Yeah, so it's two ways. It all depends. When I was doing a lot of my jazz music before, a lot of it was rhythm oriented or something. I'd have a groove in my mind. I'd have something like particular chords or like a quarter note kick drum or some kind of that. You know, when I'm writing on acoustic guitar, to me it's all about what do I want to say. And lately it's about putting the capo on for guitar players out there in different places. You know, one of the songs I did on my album Superman, on the new album It's Time, I was just playing around with this idea that was kind of so when it's on acoustic guitar, it's very experimental. I'll find some groove that I like. I'll be playing something like, and I'll think, oh, I like that. You know, where can that go? You know, so that's and then I'll start it that way, and then what I'll do is I'll go into Logic or Pro Tools or whatever, one of those studios, and lay a basic map all the way out and determine what's the hook going to be, how many choruses, what I want the bridge to say. You know, and then I just whittle it down. I don't think songs are written. I think they're rewritten.
Okay, cool. Now, do you have a lot of input in your pre and post production?
Well, I mean, I have people who speak into it. I mean, I have my friend Cedric Givens who lives in Bowie, Maryland, and I can send him any track and know that he will make it amazing. Because some tracks I play multiple instruments on, or he and I will do it together. He's a drummer, so sometimes he'll play drums or do something or not, or he'll say, take the drums out. In the case of some songs, he'll say, let me program something, or let me add this, or, you know. So he is pretty good about it, but I steer him. I know where I want him to go, but I trust him. It's like a Christmas in July when I'm sending a mix in the summer.
Well, and having somebody that you can bounce that back on, that's super important.
Yeah, because first time I hear it, I don't always like it. I go, man, he screwed it up. And then I go, oh, no. It's bad. Second time, I'm like, oh, that was genius. But I get attached to, you know, sometimes as artists, we get attached to how it's supposed to sound.
Yeah.
I mean, 17 had so many people speaking to it. One of my tracks on the album had like 4 different people speaking into it, including my agent James in Minneapolis, who was like, give me this. And, you know, so I try to take everybody into account and then just come back and really give it my all. And at some point you have to be done and say, it's done.
Well, I love the new album. Let me ask you, what is the best advice you were ever given?
Wow. The best advice I was ever given. I would say the best advice I was ever given is life is empty and meaningless.
I'm sorry?
Life is empty and meaningless. It means nothing. Anything that happens to you or doesn't happen to you, we can decide what we want to decide about that. And if we can just give up what we think it means and just take on that it doesn't even mean that at all, then there's a real opportunity to just be with what is and what isn't. I think, you know, that I discovered that in a leadership course I took, and that really blew my mind. Because, you know, we all have ideas about what we think something is, interpretations on what someone said. And, you know, I remember the very first time I sent music to radio. I was sitting around one night thinking, man, I should be doing something in my career. It was like 2008. So I emailed all these live 365 stations. And one guy wrote back and said, I can't find a single song to add on your album. And I was so disappointed. And the next day, this guy wrote back and said, I'm adding every single song. I love it. So I'm like, okay, it's subjective. You know, people like what people like. And at some point, you put it out there and go for it.
Well, I know personally, I was listening to all of your other 7 albums before this one, and I was loving every bit of it. So you were putting it down, and I was picking it up.
Oh, thank you.
So tell me, what is your favorite song on your new album? Is It's Time? what is maybe one of your favorite songs, and maybe you could give us a little bit of a taste of it
Yeah.
there.
So just so the listeners know, so my favorite song is actually Flashback 17. And that was actually the original title for what will eventually will be a record I assert called Flashback 17. What we did was we kind of put this as a showcase together to kind of enter the college radio market because I've never really been there before. So although, so people can get its time, not online or anything, it's, very limited edition copies that we made, but Flashback 17 is my favorite. I mean, for me, yeah.
It's a lot of fun. Maybe give us a little taste for our listeners
Yeah.
to sink their teeth into.
I said flashback 17. I said flashback 17. I said flashback to 17. There was Billy Joel and Billie Jean as I take a walk down the lonely street of dreams. There was big hair and pink guitars, and who's gonna take you home? Because video killed the radio star on MTV with the checks for free. Don't forget about these simple minds. If I could only travel back in time.
That's awesome.
Flashback to 17. I said flashback to 17.
Very nice, very nice.
Yeah, thank you.
If you weren't doing music, what would you be doing, Drew?
I'd probably be maybe like a park ranger or something outdoors.
Okay.
A simple life.
That's very
Maybe
cool.
tent fishing, I like stuff like that. I like fitness and that kind of thing. So I might be doing something in that arena.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed you've made quite a big drop.
Yeah. I used to tell people I lost weight, and then I realized, well, I know where it went, so I'd say I removed it. I mean, I think something else I'd be doing if I wasn't doing music, and I'm probably going to start doing it alongside of it, is really leadership and coaching and developing people. That's another passion of mine.
Yeah.
Really having others be great around me. I like that. It's rewarding.
Yeah, there's success in helping other people to be successful as well. It doesn't have to be a complete competition between people.
It doesn't. And the music business can be that way sometimes. I mean, people want to fight and jockey for this, but I think there's plenty enough for everybody. And it just feels good when you go to bed and you help somebody, or you're able to do something for somebody. That's a good feeling.
So question, if you had the opportunity, and if you could play or collaborate with anybody, past or present, who would you like to collaborate with?
Oh, wow. Past or present. Well, I think, like collaborating with a Paul McCartney would be really cool. I just think he is, he's been so hip and been around a long time, I don't know, Jimi Hendrix would be interesting to see what would he create over some of the blues things I write. But as far as modern guys, I'm really inspired by, I think they're great songwriters. I like John Mayer. I think he's a great songwriter. And I think Ed Sheeran is a genius songwriter. I would be interested to take some new songs I have them and say, here, this. How do we, and John, I just like what, following his story and what he's been doing. So probably, those would be some of the people, it would be interesting to go back to some of the classical greats.
That would be
Mozart
interesting.
or somebody and say, okay, here I have an etude. Where do you hear this going? Yeah.
I cannot thank you enough for taking time out of your day to spend with us, and I can't wait to see what's next for you. We were talking about it earlier in the studio, and we were saying there's no doubt you take your music serious, and the one thing that we all agreed on is you've got a smile that absolutely lights up a room.
Wow.
So
whenever I'm talking music, I just get so excited about it, it's all I really ever wanted to do. Once even when I was little, I loved it. It was just such a, curious way to express yourself. And, I've been, 35 years going.
Well,
My
if I
stepfather
started
would
singing,
say,
I'd start cracking and breaking things, so you don't want that.
yeah, yeah, we're really great
I'm
to
on the
know you
back end.
guys. And I just thank you guys for really, you're playing music from all kinds of artists and really out there enjoying it. And thanks for letting me know which ones you're enjoying. That
Absolutely.
really, yeah, that's always good feedback. I mean, Driven and Out of the Blue are some of my favorites in 17. And I think you said, what else did you say?
Superman?
Which one?
Superman?
Yeah, Superman.
Yeah.
Yeah, Superman is one that James. That's one I'd like to put in a DC motion picture. I
Right.
can just picture the scene with the girl and the guy on the balcony, and he kind of flies in, like this,
Swoops
it's just,
in.
yeah. I mean, it's kind of my story. I used to feel like a bumbling person sometimes, around women. So I thought, what could I write? And once again, I was just had the capo on and was sitting on the couch and went, oh, this is something to explore.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I liked about Out of the Blue. It's like, out of the blue, wait a minute, now I love you. What?
Oh, that's a true story about a girl, a Vietnamese girl who I met in a leadership program and dated, and literally we'd been crossing each other's paths but never paid attention to each other. But all of a sudden we noticed each other. Like if you were working with someone in the office and you never thought of them that way, but it wasn't even that. But then like all of a sudden she was asking me out, and I was like, oh, this is fun. So I wrote that song in an evening. I knew, the experience, and then, I was like, yeah, let me kind of give that a modern day Beatles meets like Men at Work sound or something,
Yeah.
kind of what I was thinking about.
I like I said, you're laying it down and I'm picking it up. I've just kind of fallen in love with your music, so I'm probably going to be stalking you on, social media or something.
That's fine. Talk all you like, share, let folks know about it. We got big things in the works. We're sending a bunch of this music to some television shows where it's highly likely they're going to add stuff, and I'm going
That's
to keep
awesome.
right, keep pushing.
And I can say I knew him when.
Yeah.
I got to interview his very first Skype. Thanks to Drew Davidsen for sitting with us and talking about his music today. If you would like to see more interviews just like this, you can go to facebook.com/Studio67NCC, youtube.com/NashCom College, or you can find us on Instagram at Studio67NCC. Thank you all for watching. I'm Angie Bennett, and remember, kindness matters.